Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, that was random.
Exceptional Radio.
Hey, it is the 17th of April. But boy, it sure felt cold this morning. Ooh, I didn't even look. And so the thermostat was set to 55 degrees. And sure enough, that sheet and light blanket that I had was not enough. But you know what?
Your thermostat was set to 55?
Yeah, it's an old dude. It's a dial with a mercury
thing
vial.
was possible. Wow. That's crazy.
It's got a mercury.
No,
it's old school. It's like a spring of copper, and then this bulb full of mercury. And then when the spring heats up to a certain temperature, it tilts back. And so you set this wire that's on a potentiometer, I guess, and that establishes the amount of resistance necessary for it to trip the circuit. It's really old.
it's I think
it's not an air conditioning system. It's just a heater. It's
right, but I didn't even realize that they could go that low in the sense of I thought if you set your thermostat that low, then your pipes would freeze because if the air is that cold, then it's colder than that underground. But that's where I was I guess I just didn't even ever think of the thermostat going to 55. That's
it's funny because we turn the furnace off and turn off gas flow. But last year, I guess I forgot because I didn't have to relight the pilot or re-enable gas flow. We just had it left all the way down, and then one day it just kind of came on its own. It's like, holy shit! I don't think my dad turned it on. He would have told me. So it turns out you can, with an old ass house and an old ass furnace and an old ass thermostat, it is possible to set it to an extraordinarily low threshold for turning the furnace on, below the average ambient temperature. And the basement it's not really a big basement, so, but it's, sufficiently in the ground that the temperature is relatively stable. So, I don't know. There's some backwoods witchcraft going on here, furnace witchcraft going on.
But you never had your pipes burst or anything?
No, not yet. Knock on wood and stuff. Generally, when it's cold out and we get the temperature warnings for a hard freeze, I generally start to worry when it stays at or below freezing for more than a couple days. But just turn the faucet on to a very steady just a drip. Let the faucets do their thing. I haven't had any problems really. I've had a few scares where it was I could hear some air in the pipes, and I thought, oh no, they're frozen. And at one point, I think one of the pipes did stop up for a little while, but it wasn't solid. It was just not moving. But haven't had anything break, fortunately. I have seen that happen though.
Yeah, and that's where I don't think it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
really fast when the conditions are right, which is
The
where it's like,
the
you know,
majority
it's
of the
not.
pipes in my house are relatively new. My dad and I actually installed them when we bought the house, and so there are only a few like pipes in places that were either inaccessible at the time or are inaccessible or a pain in the ass to access. That kind of stuff will require excessive digging. But it's crazy. Yesterday was beautiful. It was just gorgeous out, and then out of nowhere, like just like someone turned on the air conditioner. It got really freaking cold really fast. It was kind of like when I went to bed later later around like midnight or so. I guess that's early for me. Um, it wasn't cold yet. I think that's like one of those things that's we take for granted how quickly the weather can change. I mean, we live in Indiana, so it's like there's this like saying, if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes or something, and that's relatively accurate. But man, the cold. I'd gotten really like used to the idea of warm air.
Yeah, and I think that's where the fluctuation in the temperature is happening more frequently and more like the range of temperatures is becoming wider, and that's where I'm like it'll go from like 70 to 32 in the same day, and that's kind of where we're too far into the year for that to be occurring, because then I'm like, depending on when winter starts this year, we could very well have like 4.5 to 5 months of the year having been winter, which is where it's like, 4 is the it's like the upper limit of what it should be. But like when we're talking about 4.5, 5 months of winter, that's like almost half the year. Like it's getting into close of like we're in we're getting close to having summer daylight with winter temperatures, where it's like there's clearly a shift in the way that the climate has distributed itself, and that's where I'm like, between when I was a kid and now, I've seen it change dramatically, and it's like in another 40 years, I can't imagine this trajectory continuing and being habitable for humans. That's where I'm like, I was discussing this with my dad. Like, combustion vehicles always had a shelf life, but we're getting to the end of that shelf life because the weather is not going to permit us to keep polluting the air. And then it's like, we can't use coal powered electric vehicles either because that's the same end. Um, so we're really getting to the end of this type of existence, which is where, I can't see on the other side of it, but I don't think the population falls off that quick, but I think our infrastructure start falling off. I mean, they already have, but um, the whole
Global
individual,
shipping relies on boats. Boats travel on the
yeah,
oceans. If our weather patterns are dramatically affected, I mean, on land, then it's got to be pretty serious over water.
oh yeah, yeah, and even in the air too. It's like,
I,
you
I, I
know,
still I think of the air as just like the tip of the flame that is the body of water that surrounds Earth.
yeah,
In terms of
most
like
of
the
like you're
way the
saying, most of the
gases.
cargo's on the water.
Yeah. It's a really interesting proposition when we start thinking about the size of this problem, because it's one of those like orders of magnitude beyond comprehension type scale issues. There's an impending supply chain crisis looming as a result of the Shanghai lockdown, and the what is it? They project something like $7 trillion worth of trade that's just on hold. Last time I checked, 7 trillion was pretty significant.
Well, and between that and the market struggling to find stable investment havens, we're seeing the disruption of the infinite growth model in real time. That it started to happen. I think the real signal that people should have been paying attention to is when Starbucks stopped expanding. It's like once Starbucks stopped building new stores, it's like, hold up, what's happening here? This is the most colonial company right now on the planet. What's going on? Why are they stopping their empire expansion? But I don't think people look at those indicators enough, because it was right around when Starbucks stopped expanding that the big box stores started closing down. It was like a cascade where if you look back, it looks like everything makes sense, but when it was happening, the cascade started falling so quickly that it's like, do you remember? I mean, this is like slightly before. Do you remember Circuit City? Remember Circuit City?
Oh man, I remember.
Remember
Circuit
Kmart?
City. There are only 3 Kmarts left, and they're all in New Jersey.
Yeah.
They're all in New Jersey.
Yeah. So it's like you see these capitalist institutions that if one was born in the 80s, you would think that Blockbuster Video was going to stay around forever. Or DVD for that matter, or VHS. Like, there's things that in the 80s were presented as institutions, and the market started evolving so quickly, especially when the internet
Tower Records
really took off.
Tower Records, that was an institution. They were around from like 1960 to 2006. I mean,
and
I remember going to Tower Records, just being blown away by everything and being able to listen to everything too. That was cool.
Yeah. Which is like, I think Virgin Records, I feel like they had a few stores, at least in America too, where y'all could also do that. But
fucking Richard Branson.
Yeah, they had a Tower Records in Indianapolis, I think, in Castleton, I believe. Which again, that notion of being able to listen to the music before you buy it was pretty revolutionary at the time. But then, that shit's gone. Like,
imagine having to go into a CD shop now. What it would be like. I can't.
Well,
it's like a library.
When I worked at Best Buy, I in the couple, I think it was like 2 or 3 years I worked there, the music section like got shrunk in half while I was there. Because I remember talking to the manager like, hey, I see what's happening, and Best Buy needs to start giving people the option to make their own CD and, put their own album art and like customize their own output in store. Otherwise, like, they're not going to be selling music here for much longer. And he was like, yeah, that's a good idea, but I don't. And I'm like, trust me, like the notion of a customizable CD that then would give the artists, like somebody who was like buying albums and then the artist got their royalties because it was tracking who they were putting on the CD, and then they would make their own album art. I'm like, this is the only thing that is worth coming to a store for in like 5 years. And I'm like having this conversation with him, and he's like, yeah, but that's just a really hard like sell to management. I'm like, well, that sucks, because then you see Best Buy basically start to become the Apple store, and that's like the only thing that they really have left as a selling point for the physical locations is the Geek Squad. And you go into Best Buy, they like barely have any. I don't even know if they have any music at the local Best Buy anymore.
I'm pretty sure they have
They
like
may have
DVDs.
like a small. Yeah,
Or
they definitely have
Blu-rays.
DVDs.
Or Blu-rays.
Definitely have, but it's like one aisle. Like literally like one or two, maybe two.
Now that I think about it, I think that there's probably more aisles of phone cases than there are like optical media.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it.
And video games for that matter. They have like maybe one aisle of PS4 and 5 games, and then one aisle of Xbox stuff.
So, speaking of Microsoft, I read that they're going to start including commercials in their free-to-play games. And I'm curious how this is going to play out. Is it going to be like a, stop all gameplay and watch some weird video rendering of muscle strong man swinging swords at snakes and vegetables? Or is it going to be like product placement in the games? And I'm hoping it's product placement. And so there's like continuous gameplay. You just happen to get, instead of an elixir that's a potion that looks like a purple vessel with a cork, it's a fucking Pepsi bottle. I'm cool with that. I'm also cool if it's like, Gatorade or something that makes sense. Body armor. You just consumed 20 quarts of body armor. You're now a man.
Well, and it's so, advertising is so baked into everything at this point where I'm like, I'm surprised it took them this long to do that. But
well, Microsoft's always late to the game. They seem to be like they're patient about things, it seems.
But they get to a point where I'm like, at this point, if somebody's gonna do that, I'd rather not play than either watch the ad or use a paywall to get rid of the ads. Like,
yeah,
there's like enough media at this point that I'm like done playing these games with companies that are trying to like sell my attention without compensating me for it. And that's where I'm like, hey, I'll go read a fucking book. I don't care. I'll do anything else but this thing that you're trying to like sell my attention and not compensate me for. In 2022, there's like no excuse not to compensate a user for their attention and time. So when companies like go out of their way to try to like sell my time and then they try to bait me in there being like, oh, look at this free game. Now, while we have you here, check out this Mountain Dew advertisement. I'm like, no, I will not check out this Mountain Dew advertisement, in fact. And that's like where I am. It's really, well, not on accident. And it's because I look at the media that I gravitate towards ends up being anti-capitalist. Like, if you look at Twin Peaks season 3, or I guess Twin Peaks: The Return, because it's technically not season 3, there's a whole storyline about one of the people who owns a restaurant not selling out their recipe, not compromising their integrity for the sake of making money, because people have been complaining that, oh, now that you've become a franchise, all the pies don't taste like the original. And it's because selling out waters down the flavor. And that's like, that message is directly in the type of media that I consume. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to consume shit that tries to advertise at me. I have plenty of. If I have to go back to Twin Peaks 35 times to avoid shit that's trying to advertise me, I'll fucking do it. I have that determination in my desire to uh, cultivate my media consumption, cultivate my environment, cultivate what gets shown to me, what gets bombarded on my ears. I'm like in taking back control. That may mean that I don't get as new stuff as frequently, but that I'm fine with that. In 2022, there's just enough stuff. Like I can go back and find video games that were released in 2017 or 2015 that I never even heard of that are amazing, so that I don't have to play video games that are like, and it's like I'm playing Kingdoms of Amalur right now. That's like, I mean, I'm playing a few different games. That shit was released in like 2013, and um, they remastered it and re-released it in 2020. So like, I'm like, yeah, I'll go back and play a game that was released in 2013 or re-released in 2020, if that means I'm not like having my consciousness bombarded with shit that I didn't ask for. So I didn't go to Destiny or Kingdoms of Amalur or Call of Duty or shit to get advertised at. So if they're like, and this is like, and
I'm trying to think of the advertisements
like,
in Call of Duty. What could they even advertise in Call of Duty?
oh my God, I can't even, fucking flak jackets or something. Who knows? But I'm like, I get like if people are willing to do that to get play, like that's completely valid, and I don't want that as an option to be taken away, because then that should be an option where I'm like, if I want to play like Avengers or something that costs, give me the option to play for free if you're gonna sell ads, because they're gonna try to sell ads anyway. So like just like actually work with me as a user,
Yeah.
and I won't actively try to avoid their shit. But it's like
racing games are notorious for having manufacturer logos, like real manufacturer, performance tuner manufacturer type stuff, all throughout the imagery, because those are emblematic of the racetracks themselves and the cars.
Forza has some billboards for some shit in it. I was like, is this real or is this a joke? And then you go find out it's real, and you're like, who approved this shit?
It's not like Brando. It's like actually Gatorade.
No, it's like online therapy or some shit.
What?
Yeah, that's why I'm like, the things that they're even advertising for, it's like it has nothing to do with anything. Where you're like, yeah, if it was like,
wait,
fucking,
you're driving a car at high speeds around a road in a simulated environment where it's safe, and they're saying, hey, you might need therapy. Is that what they're communicating?
The only reason you can drive around in free roam, so like that's the only reason I ever noticed it, because I was just driving around, and it's like, I don't think you'll see those if you're in a race, but if you're just driving, because here's the thing, the news, I'm sure they do this with most of the games. It's done in coordination with the Mexican tourism agency. So like Forza on the surface is just straight up a big ad for Mexican tourism, which then you're like, this is kind of fucked up, which is like, it's cool that they do that, but then you're like, this is like really propaganda. So like, on the one hand, there's like a whole lot of propaganda and then advertising, but because I like have a Game Pass, I'm not paying for this. I don't feel exploited. So that's where I'm like, if I had paid $60, I would be so mad that shit showed up in the game, that like I had paid $60 and I'm still getting advertised to. That's the shit why black people show up late to movies. It's like, if I'm paying $20 for a fucking ticket, I'm not watching no fucking ads. No, I know. If it says 7:20, I'm showing up at 7:45, and I'm right on fucking time because I'm not wasting my time. I'm not paying for somebody else to sell my fucking time. That's why black people show up late, quote unquote late, but we're actually on time because those motherfuckers lie about the actual start time. And they sold your attention. And then people are like, oh, I want to see the previews. No, motherfucker, you're rationalizing having your time sold and being a fucking sucker. So you sit there and tell yourself you wanted to see it, even though you're watching an ad for fucking Frozen 3 and you don't even have any fucking kids. So that's where I'm like,
wait, there's three Frozen movies?
No, I don't know.
Holy crap.
I don't know. I was just riffing. That's what I'm like. I don't know.
No, I wouldn't be surprised, man. Like, I'm pretty sure that Frozen is one of Disney's like capital properties. They're like that makes the big, that brings in big crowds.
So there probably is like a Frozen 4 or 5 already lined up, and we just haven't heard about it. But yeah,
I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around this idea of a game that allows free roam. And under normal gameplay, you see the typically the idiosyncratic imagery of a racing game. You see fuel and suspension and tires and manufacturer names and stuff like that, and all that good stuff. Pirelli, Mercedes, Porsche, things of that nature. But then when you go for free roam, and you're just cruising around the, I guess, Mexican countryside now, you see billboards for therapy. That's communicating some really strange stuff. It's like, user, are you okay? You're not playing the core game. You have ventured into the outlands. Do you need assistance? If you need assistance, press green triangle. Select user help. We will send assistance to you. Like, is that the fucking future of metaverse VR gaming? Like, you roam too far out into the wasteland where the game is actually designed to get harder to prevent you from going too far. Like, if you reach the edge of the game, you will actually come across some kind of wall that's represented as a monster that, kills you and makes you respawn back in the city or some crap. Because that's how some games are. Like EVE Online, if you go too far into wormhole space, you end up in a place where the adversaries just flat out kill you. And they're computers. They're bots. They don't do anything but seek you out. They wake up, seek you out, and just annihilate your ass. And it's a really clever mechanism to keep people from going too far into unknown space. Well, that makes sense in the context of a game like that. But in a free roam game that takes place on on planet Earth, that just feels like shaming. That's not making the road difficult to drive on, or turns into gravel and turns into an off-road course, and then it turns into bouldering, and then it turns into this thing that you can't even drive on even if you have the most sophisticated off-road vehicle in the game. Like that I mean, that makes sense too, but asking people if they need, or suggesting people need therapy with advertisements, that seems like the wrong way to do it.
Yeah. Well,
make people driving that far off map, off grid into the wasteland, give them flat tires and make it so their tune has to get out and walk back. That'll keep people from doing that shit again.
Well, and it's like, it's not even like in the wasteland. It's like in the middle of the city. So that's where
that's even worse.
The way that it's set up, it's like, clearly these games are meant to be promoting tourism, and like, oh, this is, it's really cool to be able to drive around a fucking volcano that's in Mexico, or drive around some of the pyramids or whatever, where you're never actually going to be able to do this, but in the context of the game, it's like, oh, this is kind of fun.
But then the ziggurats, that's awesome.
Yeah, but then you're like, the the way that it's done as intentional tourist propaganda adds a really weird element to it when they include advertising, because then it's like, oh, they're totally using my desire to be entertained as a way to try to manipulate how I see Mexico, or use my vulnerable time to try to advertise at me to get fucking therapy or something. So that's why I'm like, this whole look at one thing because you wanted to look at it while I inject this other thing that you had no desire to hear, but because I have your attention, sorry, not sorry. It's like that, the way that advertising has made us all complicit with its ability to compromise our attention whenever we have done something with the intention of enjoying ourselves and given that thing our attention. It's like, it makes me wonder if there is something more to human attention than the surface. And that's I think why the continuous pursuit of attention feels to me more like there's something more than just a desire for money there. Like, if actual attention gives power, that's why people want that attention. And that's where I'm like, in a very abstract manner, obviously it does, but that's where I'm like, maybe it does in a more literal manner than we want to think or want to accept, because those concepts have been over mysticized or mythicized by religions and then have been attached to individual icons, when in reality that concept works for those icons. If, for example, if all this attention goes to Jesus Christ as a concept, and that concept becomes more powerful. Another example, Batman. Batman gets a lot of attention. Over time, since the 1980s, that attention has grown. Thus, the capital and influence of that idea slash concept slash persona have grown. It's not mystical. It's not mythical. It's like there's some sort of correlation with how much attention gets put towards something, with how much influence that has over the population by proxy. So that's where I'm like, there's not some mythical element to it. There's something there that we're also being diverted away from. It's like, it's in our faces, but we're not being given the information to navigate it. Like, why are we accumulating followers? Why do I have more followers than Jesus did in his actual life existence? But then that desire, I mean, I'm not saying I'm desiring to get followers on Twitter. That's not my goal. But in that accumulation, like if somebody has 30 million followers on Twitter, what does that translate to in 2,000 years? Probably nothing. Versus somebody who had 13 followers 2,000 years ago translate into 2 billion followers now or whatever, you know? So that's why I'm like, the concentration of attention does not translate into attention over time. And conversely, over time, attention may grow logarithmically on something that had little attention in its actual time of existence. Like any artist, Van Gogh fucking didn't get that same attention that he gets now when he was alive. Nikola Tesla did not get the same attention he does now as he did when he was alive. Or it's like way more now than it was when he was alive. So it's like for both of those people. So it's like you look at some people who got a lot of attention Okay, here's another one who's fading. Like Elvis, he had a whole lot of attention. His influence is fading now that no, his fans are not the main American demographic. Like nobody's seeing Elvis like they were in the 90s. Like Elvis was so hot in the 90s because the people that grew up with him were still like in control. Now Elvis is like all but gone, even though he was the king of rock and roll or whatever the fuck. Like nobody gives a fuck about Elvis now. Like literally nobody gives a fuck about Elvis. But I mean, you know, people will still go to the Graceland or whatever, but it's because they're bored. It's not because they love Elvis that much. It's like, oh, what are we gonna do this weekend? Let's go to Graceland. It's like a couple-hour drive. Okay, cool.
Let's go see the fat
And then
man's
they fucking
computer
forget
room.
about it. And then hear about how he was dating a 14-year-old when he died, and it was real sketch. And the people there who like justify it. Like it was real weird hearing them discuss it and then hearing the people on the trip start to like come up with justification. Well, I bet he didn't have sex with her. Like, what? Are you kidding me? This is like the way you're responding to that information because like for whatever reason you just want to romanticize this person you never ever met in your entire life and you're finding out this information and you're instantly justifying it. Okay. All right. And it's like people fucking knew he was dating a 14 or they didn't call it dating. I guess like, I don't know, hanging out with. Everybody was just cool with it. And that's when you're like, whoa, times were way different when like whatever the fuck that dude's name was that was like dating his cousin.
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lee Lewis, yeah. Like, what?
I think he married her, didn't he?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah. And you're like, wait, what? He's still a thing after? Okay, y'all are fucking weird.
Well,
Americans are fucking weirdos.
you know, that gives hope for guys like R. Kelly.
I mean, he's never stopped being popular.
Oh, I know. That's
like,
what I mean. Like I doubt Jerry Lee Lewis fell out of public favor until the core of his audience started checking out. Like that's when it started becoming more okay to be like, yeah, fuck that guy, hit that petter ass. You know, once R. Kelly's fans all start checking out, then there'll be a generation of people like, yeah, fuck that guy, fucking pissing and shitting on people, fuck him. Well, they should have been saying that the whole time because that's fucking nasty.
Yeah, but man, this is where I feel like this culture has only actually existed for like the last 100 years, but because of the way that American propaganda works, it's meant to make it seem like this type of obsessive celebrity culture has always existed. But even down to like the number of people, the population has grown so much so quickly that these Elon Musk grifters talking about the population, like talking about the population not being able to keep up are just completely fucking making shit up. It's like
I remember reading about like classical music history and at one point I recall reading someone essentially say that like Mozart was a rock star, Rachmaninoff was a rock star, and yeah, sure, if you had enough money to like exist in those cultural circles, in those societies, but not everyone.
There was no such thing as rock stars then.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, but very few people could actually afford to attend those concerts. They weren't like selling tickets at Ticketmaster. You couldn't.
It's called chamber music for a reason.
Yeah, chambers aren't that big.
Like people acting like a ballroom is the equivalent of like selling out in Madison Square Garden or some shit. Like, nah, you got a few nobles stiffly dancing, not moving their hips to your shit. You're not a fucking rock star. Stop it. Stop that shit.
So have you
Nobody
ever
was throwing panties at Mozart. Stop it.
have you ever seen
Nobody ever threw panties at
the
Mozart.
BBC the BBC televised performance of Led Zeppelin? It's in black and white. People are sitting on the floor like it's a concert. They're like sitting still and being really chill. And like I think there's like one person who starts like getting real kind of into it, but then someone like touches him and he has to calm down. Fucking Led Zeppelin. They made the audience be chill for Led Zeppelin. Bastards.
The institution, man. They'll ruin everything.
How the fuck do you put people like within 20 feet of Led Zeppelin and expect them to sit still? That's just like, that's cruel and unusual.
Well, and then the idea of trying to compare, like, do you know? I mean, I'm sure there's no way to even know, but how many people did Michael Jackson make faint in his lifetime? Just imagine somebody meeting Johann Sebastian Bach and fainting. That shit never happened. That shit never fucking happened. Not one time. Nobody fainted when they met Mozart. Not one person. Ever. But how many thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people? Fucking the Beatles, man. Like,
Man, I bet
I
Liberace.
don't like the Beatles.
I bet
I don't
Liberace
like the
had
Beatles.
more people faint than Mozart.
Right, for sure, no question. But again, that's not saying that they're necessarily better. But Mozart definitely wasn't a rock star. And this is where I'm like,
Elton John
way
is a
that
rock
they-
star.
oh fuck yeah,
Elton John is like
Oh fuck yeah.
the super piano rock star.
Elton John got knighted because he's such a rock star. Like, he's the defender of rock. Sir Elton John, Cosmic Knight. Fucking, and that's where,
Man, Queen needs to tour with Elton John. Like, and perform and have Elton John do all the Freddie Mercury stuff.
oh my god, that's
That would actually work.
the world. This world doesn't deserve that. We don't deserve that. I'll just say it. We gotta do a lot of like cleaning up before we'll deserve that beauty or cosmic greatness. That's where I'm like, you see these like underappreciated artists that then, even when they got acclaim, it wasn't enough. Like, there's never enough acclaim for Prince. Like, there's just not enough. We should still be acclaiming Prince. People have like moved on with their lives, like, or Michael Jackson, because of like media destruction of this person's personality, where you're like, yeah, the motherfucker was weird. Of course the motherfucker was weird.
Most musicians are pretty weird.
But if there was one goddamn shred of evidence that he did anything untoward at all, he would have been in fucking prison when he was alive. Like, straight up. That's where I'm like, of all of the thing and the way that they went after Wonderland, or Neverland, I mean, I was alive when the FBI was like raiding his shit. They went through every fucking square inch of that place. They found his porno stash. None of it was child porn. He had a huge porn stash, and absolutely none of it was child porn. It was all like hetero porn, and they didn't even find anything that was like out of the mainstream pornography at the time. They had cameras in the room. There was like shit that they found where they tried to make it out to be his grooming room, and they were trying to say, oh, he would have the boys in there. No, not. And then the only people that said that were then shown to have also lied on the stand before. Then their parents had also coached them to lie. Then the father committed fucking suicide. The father of the kids that were in the original case with the Michael Jackson thing, who were both shown to have coached their kids to lie, he killed himself. So this is where I'm like, all that said, his it was like, I'm not saying like it was character assassination, but this is like the closest thing we've ever had to a character assassination by people who are known fraudsters that were the only ones that actually went to court on this case. So that's where I'm like, you kind of have to look at it and like, if the FBI went into this man's place, did not find anything even remotely illegal, he went to trial, got off because he did not have anything showing anything illegal, then that's where I'm like, I can't move forward in good conscience and pretend that this dude is even remotely guilty of these things because of the way that this system tries to make people guilty when they aren't. If there was anything even close to him being guilty, he would have fucking died in prison. So that's where I'm like, I'm not saying he never did anything wrong in his life, but those things that he was accused of and investigated very thoroughly for, it's like if you weren't alive at the time, then it's very easy to like not understand how much the FBI just tore apart Neverland. And if you don't like have a good memory, then it's also easy to forget like how much the FBI tore apart Neverland. But they had this man without makeup. They had him all over, his mugshots all over the news without his wigs. They deconstructed everything about him to take away any sort of image of what people had of Michael Jackson. It was all deconstructed. And after that was done by the FBI, they did not find anything to actually put him in prison. So that's where I'm like, I can't.
The idea that the FBI just couldn't find anything, that they're somehow incompetent, is
knowing that they tried to do this shit to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as well.
I mean, just knowing that they have a very high success rate at when somebody's actually a criminal. Like,
and knowing that they try to do it when people have too much social influence and they don't want it. They have a public history that we now know that they have files on these people. Fucking Tupac. They had a file on Tupac trying to bring him down, which is where I'm like, you can't, I mean, not you, but no one who has any sense can know these things and act like there's no influence whatsoever. Like the whole Wacko Jacko shit where they tried to like make him out to be crazy for things that now are not normal, but they're at the like forefront of rejuvenative therapy. Knowing that this dude had a fucking second and third degree burns on his head from the fucking Pepsi thing. It's like people forgot the dude's head caught on fire. You know what I mean?
yeah.
His fucking head caught on fire. That's not a small deal. His head caught on fire and he couldn't fucking grow hair on the top of his head because his head caught on fire. So when 20 years after that, when he's like wearing a wig, it's like, that's because of Pepsi. The reason he had to wear a wig is because Pepsi did pyrotechnics that were unchecked, too close to his fucking hair, and his hair caught on fire. So he's not a wig. He didn't wear a wig because he's a weirdo. He wore a wig because capitalism fucking literally burned his body to an unrecognizable form by the end of his life.
It's actually it's scarier than just pyro. The pyro set off was too close to the lighting cans, and they were just causing they got too hot.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
the
right.
lighting
that's
gels
right.
themselves dripped onto
That's
his
right.
head, and that's what sustained the heat on him. It wasn't just like you know,
Well, and
it
it was
was
going
it was like
for a couple seconds.
yeah, it was like the fire itself, but then like the molten lighting gel itself retaining all of that heat energy, and not they couldn't just get it off of him because it's in his hair, destroying his scalp. This is one of those things that like, at the time I never really considered it. It was always like, oh, that's just terrible. But once you start to have an idea of how human physiology works, and how skin damage occurs, and then the way that skin repairs itself, man, heat is like the enemy. Heat is. I was thinking about like the electromagnetic spectrum, and like you know heat energy itself is present, like even when there's no visible light. And it's one of those things that like it doesn't even take that much, and causes damage to organic tissue. Just a little bit of exposure to the sun, even, and the heat that's transmitted through, that's induced from like the transfer from photons. Like, holy crap! All of these things, we really, I think we really take for granted the amount of just like raw energy that is around us at all times, like invisible light, in ultraviolet light, into like radiation, and then like the other direction into like towards the thermal spectrum. Like all of this stuff, like it's just it's just there. We take it for granted, and these things can all kill us.
Yeah, and they will. I think like skin cancer is like real, and it's really easy to discount the effects of solar rays on our lifespan
Yeah,
because
radiation
we are
exposure is
inside a lot of times.
well, radiation exposure is cumulative.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's nice that our cells regenerate at varying rates, and on some level, like we have a different like outer layer of skin at some point, than we did 6 months ago. But at the cellular level, that stuff, those changes are lasting. I think every kid has like a scrape on their knee or elbow from when they were a kid, or every person has a scrape on their knee, or like a scar from when they were a kid, when they fell off of a. Well, I don't know. Do kids fall off bikes anymore? Is that part of growing up still?
There's not enough bikeable road for kids to do that.
There's nowhere for kids to ride bikes anymore. Oh, that's so sad. Can't play in a park because there might be poo in it. Can't play in the field next to the park because there might be poo in it. I mean, trees can. No, last time I was at the park, all the branches at like reasonable, even adult jumping grab a hold of height had all been pruned. So you can probably, tree climbing is not really a thing. You got to do that professionally as an arborist and chop them down. What kind of scars do people have now from growing up? None?
Emotional.
Emotional scars. Oh. Gone are the days when growing up and surviving through the teenage years meant maybe you had like to wear a cast at some point, and now you just end up with therapy.
Well,
And
and
we
I'm
want to act
starting
like
to
the dark
see,
ages were behind us.
like, I don't know if you've seen the trend of people like dyeing their hair gray and like dressing like old people. No, seriously, man. It's like that's how kids are dressing, and I don't think it's because they're trying to like bond with old people so much as like I think they're trying to express their existence and how like fucking it's not it's a reflection of how life has turned them into like old people at 20, I think. And that's where
Okay, I for a little while there, I thought you were talking about like teenagers, like 15-year-old, 16-year-old stealing their grandma's ID and dressing up like grandma or grandpa so they could buy
no, I
booze.
mean, well, people have done that, but I mean, like, it's not even like it's dressing like old people too, but
Yeah.
it's not because they're trying to look like their grandparents. It's just because they've like taken on the old person aesthetic.
Wow.
And that's where again it's like you see it where I'm like, no, really, it's a thing.
Are they playing
I
like?
thought it was
Are they playing
just
cribbage and pinochle and rummy?
I mean, I'm sure they're like playing Wordle and shit. Like it's
Yeah.
like, and that's what I mean. It's like, it's not like they're not trying to be their grandparents.
Yeah.
They're just dressing like old people, but what like this generation of old people would be. It's like it's like a really weird phenomenon. That's
Yeah.
where I'm like, I see it happening, but I think the unobservant would see it and think that that person is like dressing up for the day, but it's like an aesthetic. And it's like I don't even think that they're necessarily trying to make themselves unattractive to older people either, which is where I think it's like completely for them. Because it like it looks weird in that it doesn't look like anything. It looks like a combination of things, but in a way that is like, oh, that's a young person, but they're dressing like an old person. They kind of look like an old person, but they're like not. Yeah, and it's like it's gone on longer than I expected it would. Which is where I thought it was like a passing fad at first, but it seems to be an aesthetic.
Interesting.
Which, it still may pass, but it's lasted like about 2 years now, at least. Like, I feel like I started seeing it around 2020, and it's only gotten like people wearing their hair gray has only gotten younger.
Weird. I wonder if there's like a hair color coding, if there's like standardized hair color meaning thing that's been broadly accepted across the internet. Like blue or green hair or fuchsia, the standard like punky colors. Red, white, all black light reactive, of course. I wonder what those things mean.
Oh, I just searched it just to see if there was articles about the trend. But this is also the things that got returned were like how to treat gray hair in teenagers. And I'm like, wait, what the fuck? Why are teenagers getting gray hair?
Wait. They're getting like
Actual gray hair.
like 40 years
Yeah.
of stress before they're
Yes.
out of the house, before they're out of
Yes.
their parents' house. That's not right.
That's not right. That's what I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah. And then I think America, like back to that notion, like, yeah, these kids are coming away with emotional stress or emotional scars. Like, yeah, they're not riding bikes because they're too fucking emotionally damaged to get on a bike. They're graying already. Fuck. That's wild. Yeah.
What did Yasi just say?
Probably because they have to go to school with school shooters.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, we didn't have those.
Mm-mm. Oh, there's like nothing about a trend, and it's all about. Oh my God. Well, that's crazy. Well, and I mean, okay. we were looking at pictures from my mom's event center yesterday, and you can tell before the pandemic, there's just a naive optimism in people's eyes. They're like, "This is gonna be my year." It's like, it's like before the pandemic happened, people like totally had like a gleam in their eyes that they don't have anymore. And it's like, I don't think Americans care about that shit in general because, we see the way that they treat veterans after war and like just ignore their mental health needs and all that shit. So it's like, or mental health in general. But to see the children not not able to ride their bikes, not because of the roads, but because they're already graying and they're so stressed out that their hair's turning gray is that's a different one. Like I didn't
see that coming. That wasn't on the
Didn't
list.
see that coming.
Yeah.
That wasn't on the list of things I was like, oh, kids these days are going gray because of the stress. Like,
I mean,
that's crazy.
I hate to waste the bingo wild card on something like that, but fuck. We're only a third of the way into the year.
Yeah,
there's still time for weirder shit to happen.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it just feels like it's weird that simpler times were when we were trying to convince half of America that we shouldn't try to build a wall between us and Mexico. Like that feels like such a simpler time. Can't we just go back to arguing about border walls?
What, 2015, 2015,
Yeah.
2017?
Yeah. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird how, well, because then, okay, the way we have now been inundated with images of refugees that were previously actively occluded from our, not even just our vision, our capacity to even see them it's like a weird, okay. Americans were already fatigued from war because of their own imperialism. So now to have all these images of imperialism that they're supposed to identify with shoved in their faces, now they're becoming fatigued of those. So it's like this weird American escapism is like kicking a wasp nest and then acting like it's not your fault that you're getting stung. And that's like,
I watched a guy throw a rock at a hornet's nest one time, or not a wasp nest one time, and I've never run so fast in my life. And I've never seen anyone roll around in the ground screaming like that before.
yeah, but that's where I'm like, it feels like every time they get stung, they're like, what the fuck happened? Why are we getting stung? When they just ran up and kicked the goddamn nest. So I'm looking at it like now they're tired of getting stung, but I'm not sure if they're tired of kicking nests. So it's like, are we going to continue imperialism? Because it seems like we're sending more boots to kick wasps' nests. But like, did we learn our lessons? Like, don't kick wasp nests because you're gonna get stung. I don't know if
You
like
just gave me a great idea for a video game. It's called Wasp Nest Kicking Simulator. And you get to go around kicking wasp nests.
and then trying to see if you can run away before you get stung to death.
Yeah, it's a button masher. You have to press buttons in sequence, and if you get the right sequence, like drummers will have no problem with this. Musicians will be good at this because they'll just be able to play it like, perfect time. But normal people will be like who don't have rhythm, and these people definitely know who they are. They will suffer because their character will get like all puffy and have hives and shit, and their avatar won't be pretty. And this will be online, so it'll affect the entire metaverse avatar. Or you can, pay $9.95 for the elixir brought to you by Pepsi, and it will clear up your allergic reaction to the wasps. That's how we'll pay for it. We'll get Pepsi to pay for it.
Then Pepsi Man shows up. It's all using Pepsi Man as the character.
Yeah, Pepsi.
I remember playing that video game where I'm like, this is one of the weirdest timelines. I feel like our timeline is
We had
like
a 7-Up game too.
I don't remember that one.
I think it was on like Genesis. It was terrible.
This timeline feels like everything is a Rick and Morty cable ad. Like, because advertising got all of the capital from the post microchip expansion, like all that capital went towards advertising. And it's like, that's what this universe feels like. Everything is a means for an advertisement to be injected into it. Like, that's what our science is dedicated to. How can we inject an ad here? You have contact lenses that can adjust and they can make you see like an eagle, but how can we inject an ad in there?
Well,
if we give away the contacts, maybe we can have it so that the advertisements will play every 30 seconds and people will just deal with it, because the trade-off is good enough that, yeah, they'll take the eagle eye lenses if they have to see ads.
Well, we know
because
we know the lower third is generally ignored anyways.
So we'll put it in the upper third to make sure they see it.
Yep.
Well, no, because we have eye tracking on the contact lenses, which, yes, they do eye tracking on advertising even with no contact lenses, to make sure that if someone is being paid to watch an ad, that they're actually looking at it. That shit already exists. That's fucked up. And that's where I'm like, it feels as if advertising has completely just co-opted technology and the technological progression, which is why I'm so anti-advertising in my own life at this point. It's like, I see you advertising trying to usurp everything and anything people do. So I'm going to avoid it like the plague, because I feel like the reason people need to meditate or seek to meditate is because advertising has made it impossible for us to have our own thoughts unimpeded by advertising itself. Like, we can't escape it. And so we seek like isolation from thought impedance. And that's where it's like, we have to seek it out, because if you're watching any podcast or any like video, the person whose voice you're watching will then take a pause and try to serve you something and try to sell you something. And
Oh
it's
yeah,
like, that's not what I was
it's
here
like
for.
this is brought to you by blah blah blah. They do these things. This thing is something that you need, and it'll improve your life. Go to this website, and if you give them this code, you'll get 25% off, and we'll get some affiliate bonus, like that kind of crap.
Yep.
I hate that shit.
Well, and this is like any video I watch on YouTube, I usually just skip to like 3 minutes in. If it's 10 minutes, I'll skip past 2 minutes. If it's 15 minutes, I'll skip past 3 minutes. They'll inject it, like they'll start off with like a minute of material, and then they'll give you an ad. And then now people will like start putting it in the middle. And depending on how popular the channel is, they might have them in both.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, what's it? Linus Tech Tips.
Yeah.
I was getting.
I like that guy.
I like Linus, but I was starting to realize like, oh, this is just an ad.
Yeah.
His whole thing is an ad. So then I realized I wasn't even subscribed to Linus. So I started not like telling YouTube, don't recommend this channel. Then suddenly, like 3 other fucking Linus Tech Tip channels, like they're Linus Clips or Linus Tech Tip channel clips. And there's like his like Silent Bob that talks a lot cohort. He started popping up. I'm like, I'm not subscribed to any of this. Why is YouTube trying to force me to watch Linus Tech Tips? Oh, it's because somebody paid for his placement. Somebody sent him that fucking $10,000 worth of equipment that they then paid for him to get placed for, that he's going to make it sound like this is a really cool thing that they sent me, but it's because they paid for him to get pushed up to the top of the fucking feed. So it's where I'm like, Linus is cool, but he's a big ad now. I mean, I don't know if he ever wasn't an ad.
What blows my mind is there are people out there who will make a video of a product that they purchase, and then they'll go so far as to say, and I bought this myself. I'm not affiliated with blah, blah, blah in any way. I'm just really like this product. And then they include their affiliate link in the bottom, like in the description. It's like, man, can't I just buy something without being redirected by someone else or having to include a broken referral link? The broken referral link is the part that bothers me the most. It's like you click on the link just because you want to see what it is. It's like, this doesn't exist. It's like, motherfuckers, if I just search for it, I'll find it. And then you search for it, and then, well, bada bing, it appears on your screen, because that's how the internet works. And there's part of me that's really, like, that's always been interested in the whole like affiliate marketing microcosm, because some people manage to make a lot of money doing it, and they make it seem like it's a side gig, like, 3 or 4 hours a day here, just maintaining the affiliate links and all that stuff, or updating their best of for this year, and somehow they make some money doing this. But I don't know, it just doesn't.
They can't do it forever though, because there has to be market saturation. Like every market reaches saturation.
Yeah.
Like at some point, every man's gonna have all his ball shaving equipment, and they're gonna like keep having these ads for fucking ball shaving equipment pop up, and I'm like, dude, who else are you selling this shit to? Like, is it the same people buying the same shit over and over? 'Cause at some point, like, all the people have their ball shavers.
Well, maybe
I don't need the ball shaver ad anymore because I never bought one in the first place.
Are they
All
like
the people
single
who bought
use?
them was
They're like single use disposable ball shavers.
I sure hope not. Cause
It's like, I can't imagine, like, if there's a dude out there who has to get rid of their clippers every time they shave their nuts, that means they've got a really serious dermatological issue.
Well, this is the same culture that was then doing the like underwear service. So it's like you wear the underwear and send them back, and they send you some new ones because these motherfuckers are too lazy to actually do laundry. And you realize like, oh, they're trying to like cater to a lazy American male who also has terrible hygienic practices, and then making it seem like that person can then go out and get laid. Like those things are totally meant to make it seem as if like, oh, you get our ball shaver, you get our underwear, you don't have to think about washing your underwear, and you're still gonna get laid. Like, none of these motherfuckers are actually going out and getting laid, but they're buying this notion because advertising sold them that.
So
what
speaking of dudes who can't get laid, I've been watching Halo, and I decided to.
that transition.
Oh yeah, this is good.
That's a good one.
So Halo is, for those that are unaware, is a series where they've translated the video game into this live action story that kind of explains things. Maybe I'm missing parts of the story because I stopped playing after Halo 4. But so far it's really enjoyable. But anyways, I went to my favorite information site, and I found out that there was like there's a sidelined series, miniseries, movies, like 2 episodes, and it's basically a story where everyone dies, and there's no Master Chief. It's just a story about people in the Halo universe. And there's a cartoon, and then there's another story where you meet some guy who's like a admiral of a ship, and he's got to go save the Master Chief. And I foolishly, read the comments because sometimes I'm a glutton for punishment, or sometimes I just want to be amused. And there's this one commenter who's talking about why they don't understand why they would select Spartan females to be for the Spartan program, that there are no female Navy SEALs, that men make better decisions than women, and all this other bullshit. And they close it with something along the lines of like, I'm not an incel, but. And all I can think about is clearly they did not pay attention to the whole part about the candidates for the Spartan program were children, and they were selected based on genetic factors. Genetic factors, meaning not everyone can even be selected for the program, and half of the candidates die because it's a dangerous process. So that tells me 2 things. There's a significant portion of that audience that didn't pay attention when they explained why candidates were selected, because they lay it out flat out. Oh, I don't know why there would even be Spartan women. Well, of course there are fucking Spartan women. Like the idea that
I thought at one point they were like even messing around with making Master Chief a woman.
Yeah.
And I think people were like, "No, it's got to have a penis."
The thing about Master Chief,
it's got to have a penis.
The thing about Master Chief that works so well is that the Master Chief wears a mask or a helmet, and they had a really good opportunity to make the Master Chief's voice be the same for every Spartan because it's a translator. It just communicates, and that way it doesn't matter. They can take their helmet off, and then it could be a woman, and they could have a normal voice. That they had an opportunity. They actually had an opportunity to have a faceless Master Chief, kind of like a Mandalorian, one who never takes his helmet off. We don't even know what they look like, and that's actually a really incredible opportunity that was squandered, because if nobody knows what the guy looks like, then he can look like anybody, and then anybody can aspire to be the Master Chief if that's what they really want. I mean, who doesn't want to be a cybernetic war machine that can survive 6 video games and 2 movies at this point? That's a better survivability rate than like any character. Godzilla, maybe.
And I think part of the problem, quote unquote, these idiots were having with the character being not a dude was like, oh, the armor's like 400 pounds, so you have to be a dude that's like 8 feet tall to be able to wear that armor. It's like, yeah, you'd have to be an 8 foot tall person, which don't really exist, and they don't really if it's gonna be an 8 foot tall person, it could be a woman just the same, because there's like 7 feet tall women. So that's I don't.
That's actually a really that's I'm glad that you mentioned that, because in this series, one of the Spartans on the Master Chief's squad is like as tall as he is. She dwarfs everybody, or she makes everyone look small. It's great.
I think the tallest woman ever is like 7'6" or something. Whereas recorded in modern Western history.
I mean, there's some really tall.
Maybe 7.
There's some tall women in WNBA. They're incredible athletes. I don't I think this weird machismo that exists within like video game culture and in action fiction culture, like it's like a slice of the whole group of people that are interested in these things, because like you look at anime and they celebrate strong women, like
Tallest woman
unbelievably
ever
strong
recorded
women.
is 8 feet tall.
That's a really tall person.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Jesus fuck. Well, there's like 7'8", one was 7'7", and then the tallest living, I think, is 7 foot. 24-year-old, well, yeah, probably not 25 Turkish woman. Rumesa Elgi. Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of short men would be upset that this woman actually exists in real life.
And let's see, the tallest WNBA player of all time,
Probably
Margot
6'7".
Malgorzata Didek, who was 7'2".
Oh damn.
She is the only WNBA player who is taller than 7 feet. And oh well, she passed away in 2011. Cardiac arrest.
Age?
Doesn't say.
Well, because then that's like one of the issues with tall people is like their bodies break down really fast, especially in their knees and their ankles.
She was 37.
Jesus Christ, yeah.
Yeah.
Their bodies just struggle to handle all that, like, and that's where, you know, between exceptionally tall people and then like people with an exceptional amount of muscle, like the body has to deal with that shit and doesn't discriminate. It's like the heart.
Brittany Griner, 6'9".
Yeah, she's like,
And she's still active. She's still playing.
I mean, she's locked up though.
Well, yeah, she's not playing this at this moment, but
Yeah, that's what I'm like. Yeah, no, she's not active right now.
that's
Like,
a technicality.
I'm not
She
laughing at
she
it.
would be
Yeah.
active. She would be.
Yeah. That's what I'm like. America is such a crock of shit. Like
Then,
that Brittany is like languishing in prison right now. This country is a crock of fucking absolute shit. I hope it falls apart like tomorrow. Honestly, like all these like imperialist fuck boy countries. I hope they fall apart like tomorrow. But I hope America fall apart like yesterday, because it's like shit like this where they're like an American citizen sitting in a fucking Russian prison while Russia's attacking Ukraine, threatening nukes. We have nukes. Fucking everybody's under constant threat because of a bunch of fuckboy imperialists can't fucking stop like waving their dicks around. And it's like, man, fuck this. It's like between imperialism and advertising, this place fucking sucks. And that's why kids' hair is turning gray. You know, I thought it was just an aesthetic. Oh, this place sucks that much that it's turning teenagers' hairs fucking gray. But that's where I'm like, I have faith in these kids because they're not buying into it. But they got to get out of the hostage situation that they're currently in because of these imperialist fuckboys.
So have you heard about the Be Real social network? Like it encourages.
No, I have not.
So every day or something like that, there's a window where people are supposed to post, and it uses the front facing and rear facing camera simultaneously. So it takes a picture of whatever you're doing and then of the user. And then it's a way that people share like I mean, in the articles that I've read, they talk about it like it's so people can share their mundane lives. Like, ha, it's mundane. Look at this. But I think the positive effect is that it will show that not everyone's doing some crazy shit all the time. Sometimes people are just sitting in their living room reading a book or drinking some tea or making hot chocolate or, you know, doing normal things. And so it kind of reinforces this idea that, hey, it's okay to just hang out in a room and do your own thing. And it's like, I think it had something like 500% increase in downloads in the last week or something like that. It's
Say like what demographic is
all young people.
using it? Oh, that's cool.
Gen Z and the oldest of the alphas. That's who they're targeting with this. And it's a way so people within the network, anyone who's, it looks through your contacts to find everyone, to connect everyone, of course. And so that way people can be reminded, it's like, hey, I'm not doing anything either. It's all good. We're all in this together.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, that's totally in line with what I'm perceiving from these youth, and that they have like, I think they understand that they can't perpetuate the same behaviors of the last 100 years in like any of them, basically. Down to these kids being very anti-homophobe and anti-transphobe and shit like that.
Yeah.
I think they're way more openly anti-phobia, which is necessary to actually get rid of the phobes and make them afraid to air their phobias in public or act on their phobias as like a way to oppress other people.
Phobiists? Phobists? Phobists. Phobes. Phobivities. Phobing. That's it. They're phobing. Phobers are going to phobe. I think there's still hope for a better world. I just can't figure out how to get to the from like present. Then there's a big gap between a world that has somehow miraculously shed all of these problems. Like, how do we dismantle all of these institutions and all of these systems without completely upending everyone's lives? Maybe everyone's lives have to be upended? That's a hard question.
I think that's part of it. Yeah, it's like we can't operate as if some of our shit doesn't depend on child labor in some country that's occluded from our vision. And it like, yeah, everyone's lives have to be disrupted in order for this bullshit to stop, which is like, that doesn't mean it's all bad either.
So
it.
The other day we were talking about, like, you mentioned that, like, my truck, my close to 30-year-old truck, at this point is essentially better for the environment because it's traveled close to 300,000 miles, and even at $1,000 a year of maintenance, which is not the case. And I absolutely know this because I'm the second owner, and the previous owner had immaculate records, and she worked for the Ford dealership, and it was maintained at the Ford dealership. Like, that thing has already paid for itself, like you described. And I think in the 90s, I think it was like a $20,000 truck, less than $20,000 truck. And so even at $1,000 a year, which I know that it wasn't the case, so now it's like a $50,000 over the course of its life, if $1,000 in maintenance was made, and that's a big if. It's gone 300,000 miles. cars do travel a long distance nowadays. Like 200,000 miles is pretty much standard for a well-maintained vehicle. But that's over the course of like, over a decade, 15, almost sometimes 20 years. How are we going to make batteries and used electric cars that required brand new batteries come close to that kind of like long-term utilization, like and value over time? Because the value of that truck was extracted close to 100,000 miles ago. Everything that it does now is like bonus in terms of like extracting value from the investment in a vehicle. You have to go like 200,000 miles basically, otherwise you're just paying more. And so, how is it that a vehicle that already costs $50,000, like when it's new, even on the used market, they're like $20,000, $30,000, sometimes more, and they have used batteries. When it comes time to replace that battery for like the third or fourth owner, like that's not going to be cheap. And then they're essentially,
if it's even possible, and that's one of the problems with Teslas is
but then they're still
they're built.
Then they're back to square one with with having to re-extract value. Like all the value that was extracted is gone now. It's reinvested back in that battery. Like there's no way that this can work.
Well, and this is where I'm like
I think
wondering.
that's the thing that breaks the whole consumer automobile cycle, because now all of the EVs essentially require a brand new component every other owner, if it even makes it to the third owner.
Well, and I think this is what's happening with the aftermarket Teslas, where it's like there doesn't seem to be a lot of second or third tier Tesla owners of used vehicles, because it's like, I'm sure this battery problem is like, once you get to 150, 200,000 miles, the battery stops keeping the charge and they just don't talk about it. So
it's
that
worse
vehicle
though. Like,
just has to.
Have you ever had like a really fancy or used a really fancy like lithium battery powered electric drill? They're amazing, right? They've got like instant torque. Well, you jump ahead to like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, that really fancy drill, the battery doesn't hold charge as long, and it doesn't have nearly the same quality of juice that it had before. And it's the nature of using a machine over and over again. So the machine itself will wear out. And what do we do with electric drills when they're done? Fucking throw them away and buy a new one.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very few people would even have the tools, let alone the know-how, to open one of those things up, take apart the motor structure itself, if not build new brushes, like replace the brushes, and then reassemble it. Like, that's not easy. I just described the most basic, most vague, basic version of it, of how to do that too. And it's like, I'm probably leaving out a whole bunch of really important steps. Like, no one's gonna repair those motors. They're just gonna replace it, and that just adds to the cost. And so there's absolutely no anybody who pretends to be environmentally conscious while operating a giant power drill. Like, they're just lying to themselves. I can't believe I'm advocating for like continued use of petrochemicals.
Well, and that's kind of where, again, it gets back to like knowing that we had trains that were between cities that got deconstructed to replace with this. That's where I'm like, it's definitely possible that we can implement something that's better, but the propaganda can't keep influencing the decision making, or else it's just going to end up with like climate change making all of this irrelevant. And that's like, old people can't accept that, because I think that they were raised at a time when institutions made things able to seem permanent, and they're not. Like anyone who's over like 45 just has a real problem accepting that nothing's permanent. And they're the ones,
Yeah,
oh,
dude.
the millennials are killing all the restaurants, killing all
No.
the industries.
Fucking media institutions, media empires die in like the flash of a camera. All it takes is one picture, and then someone's entire like media career is done. Like, it's not the audience's fault that they don't like the programming. If a restaurant's failing, it's because the food sucks, or the service sucks, or because the management is terrible. Like, can't just make a product well, I guess you can't. People do expect people just to buy products that just appear, and there are enough people out there that it's relatively reasonable to make something and someone's going to buy it, provided there's sufficient marketing. But not when it's food. And Applebee's was never that good to begin with.
It wasn't. You know, I'm looking at how much of American restaurant existence depended upon people not having good palates. It's like if you get Americans used to home TV dinners, then you can convince them to go out to a restaurant and pay for something that was frozen and not fresh, and they'll give it 5-star review because they can't taste the difference anyway, because they've spent their entire life eating food that was never fresh. I mean, it was fresh before it got frozen, but they've never seen like something that wasn't frozen. And I think that's where it's wild how many Americans never learn how to cook even the most basic meal, let alone, you know.
I wonder how many Americans think, I wonder how many people think that the boneless wing is a real thing.
Well, and that's like how many Americans don't know meat comes from animals.
I wonder
You
how
know,
many I wonder how many vegans don't realize how many organisms are killed in fields just by agricultural process.
I mean, but that's mass produced agriculture. So that's where I'm like, I'm definitely not a vegan or even a vegetarian. But the only reason that happens is because of mass production. It's not the agriculture, it's the mass production that does that. Because it's like that shit doesn't happen on a small farm. But because vegans in America still depend upon mass produced food, the byproduct is like animals being killed by farm machines because the farmers only give a fuck about their yield because the farmers aren't vegetarian.
Oh, I was
That's
thinking
where it's
more like insects and than rodents, but yeah.
I mean, even then, the insects don't in like a small operation don't get killed. Like it's like you never get pests that are out of control, and then there's good insects that you need. Like if you have ladybugs or some shit, you like don't get rid of them.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've definitely chopped up some like grubs and worms when I till up the soil in the garden. I mean, I'm using a machine. It definitely kills some things.
And a lot of birds, and that's where birds would probably eat a lot of those anyway. Yeah. So that's where I'm like,
I'm not worried about those things. But those have to be factored in if we're talking about like, you know, killing organisms. They are organisms that are dying in the process. But like
that's where I'm like, it's the smaller the scale, the less organisms you kill by proxy. And then it's like if you really didn't want to kill the worms when you tilled the soil, you'd use hand tills and it would just take you like 10 times as long.
Yeah.
But
Or
you're
I
not
would,
concerned with that. And that's like, it's like you could do it.
if I was
but
really
that's
concerned
not
with
your
it,
concern.
I would use a synthetic medium, and I would be really into like aquaponics or aeroponics or hydroponics of
Yep,
some kind.
exactly.
And I
But
would,
that's not your concern.
no, I'm not trying to create a sterile environment to grow tomatoes that taste equally sterile.
Yeah.
They need real dirt. they need real dirt. They need like mixed concentrations of nutrients, like variable. They can't always be this like static thing. I have had a few like greenhouse tomatoes though that were grown in raised beds of well, it was bagged dirt. I'm sure there had to be some insects in it. There's no way. Because I know that microwaved dirt doesn't really work very well.
That's where fertilizer will have its own endothermic reaction.
Yep.
So if you have like a pile of fertilizer, that shit might be 150, 170 degrees on the inside.
Yeah. We use chicken shit on the tomatoes, and it's magnificent. It is like the best fertilizer, but you have to like apply water to it directly because it'll burn the roots because it gets hot. And that's really interesting. Like something is like, I guess it's decomposing that quickly that it's just hot.
That's where I'm like, oh, okay. This is kind of like what spawned me down that line of thought. There's this college called Deep Springs, and it's like 26 students, and they're like completely isolated, and it's meant to be like this self-sustaining environment. So they have like their own electrical grid. They have like mostly, I think it's all solar powered, to the point that when they are at peak, they're like selling power back. They have cattle, but they grow it to be slaughtered to sell. So there's like all these things about, like when you actually look at it, it's like the only reason they can exist the way they do is because they have money just sitting there in case, because like, for example, they hit, it's a drought year, so their farm isn't doing that well. And it's like, well, if they actually subsisted off of what the farm produced by selling, then this year they wouldn't be able to subsist, except for the fact that they have like a $30 million endowment, which is, when you break it down, it's like more than $1 million per student. So I'm thinking about this where, on the one hand, these types of environments exist where this is like the closest thing you can get to like Starfleet concerning existence, where you're like, oh, these people basically do everything. And then you realize like, yeah, they have no social life. They barely sleep. And it objectively, it sounds like a fucking shit existence. And then you realize it's like, oh, they chose this and are shunning what is effectively the capacity to apply $1 million to each of their existences to make their lives easier or more efficient, but they shun it for a more quote unquote self-sufficient life, which then you analyze, it's like, it's not actually self-sufficient. So I think ultimately, we have a problem with allowing individuals to decide the fate of large swaths of resources. And I think we're getting to the point where people are starting to realize like how ridiculous that practice actually is. It's like, it sounded cool when Elon was like, oh, we're going to go to Mars But now that we're not actually on Mars and there's no real prospect of us making it to Mars, and he's buying Twitter, people are like, okay, maybe this works somehow. And they're trying to like fucking rationalize the grift, but there's no more rationale left in the grift. Even I went and looked back. His rationale against trains, mass transit trains, is that people are dirty and he doesn't like, no, not he. People don't like being in crowded places with other dirty people. So therefore, we should build our infrastructure around cars. That was his literal argument against train infrastructure. It wasn't even practical.
That's a let them be dirty argument.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's when you're like, oh, my God, this person was able to get away with his grift for so long because he had a great PR machine and propaganda machine that was able to convince people that he's a genius. Oh, yeah, let's put him in Iron Man 2. People think he's as smart as Tony Stark. If we just put him next to this fictional character, have Tony Stark look up to Elon. That's how we'll do it. And then you realize, like, oh, this is a complete character. Elon Musk is a fucking construction that's made up to make people think he's this genius inventor who's never actually invented a thing in his life that people are using. Like, and even the patents he's on, he's just like a side contributor. He's not the main contributor. So Elon Musk is a lie. I mean, we've been calling it out, but I think we are getting much closer to everyone else. Like, the emperor's clothes are disappearing as we speak. And that's where I'm like,
no way, man. You just can't see it.
I think the Tesla bot was his biggest fuck up. Like,
I think that Cybertruck is the biggest fuck up.
Well, the Cybertruck, at least the Cybertruck, he can blame the chip shortage when they don't deliver the Cybertrucks. He's got no excuses as to why, when they inevitably never deliver the Tesla bot with what he promised, as to why. So that's like all the way, like the way he brought out a person in a costume, it's gonna make it look like he was actively trying to grift people with the Tesla bot, because he was. But at least with the Cybertruck, you can tell he believed his own shit, because he threw the fucking steel ball at the quote unquote bulletproof window, where you're like, if it was gonna shatter, he wouldn't have done that. If he knew it was gonna shatter, he wouldn't have done that. But in his own dumbass mind, him being a dick had made that window bulletproof, even though the engineers were adamant that he's like,
yeah, and the internal memos were somehow discovered where they're like, they even said that it was a bad idea. This is a bad idea. We don't think that you should proceed with this.
They tried to get him to stop because he was very headstrong about doing that in a demo. And they're like, yeah, it's not ready yet. He's like, I don't give a fuck. Make it ready. And that whole Star Trek thing when they're like, oh, Captain, it'll take 3 hours. I need it done in 2 hours. That doesn't work in real life. That whole like, oh, the engineer says it's going to take 10 hours. Well, I need it done in 5. That shit doesn't work. It only works in fiction.
Well, Scotty eventually reveals to Geordi that, like, you know,
that he overinflates it.
Yeah, that's how a miracle maker actually makes miracles. That he says it'll take longer than it will.
We can't assume that everyone got that knowledge, because Scotty had to tell it directly to Geordi.
That's
so
true.
We can't assume that it was like in the engineer's manual, like, because Geordi didn't know to do it. So that's where I know, when I was like being trained in production, somebody's like, hey, always give it 90% on the first try, because they're going to critique you no matter what. So you're able to hit them with that 10% on the second time around, because people can't help themselves. Even if it's perfect, they're going to critique something because they're assholes. So like, yeah, somebody told me that, but it's not written in a fucking book. So a lot of people will come out the gate when they're producing something with 100%, not realizing like, yeah, if you don't give yourself room to improve, like the critique that people naturally do is going to make it so that then you're stuck. So yeah, don't ever come out the gate 100% because humans are assholes. And that's like what basically captains are. But that's what I'm like, again, I don't know if that information was distributed to all of the Starfleet engineers. So then you got all these captains like, hey, give me that shit faster than you told me. And then it doesn't work when they throw the steel ball window and it shatters. So that's where, in my head, I think Elon's dumbass thought he could just will the window into being bulletproof. Whereas that's not how that shit works in real life. It only works on Star Trek like that.
The glass won't break. The glass won't break. The glass won't break. Smash. Fuck. Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, how quickly did he pivot from the Tesla bot to Twitter? It's like the Tesla bot announcement didn't even happen now because he knows they're not going to deliver anything on it. Main thing being all of the things he claimed it would do. If you go look at Amazon's robots, they don't look anything like a human.
Yeah, they're remote controlled vehicles.
But they also have like
some of them have arms.
They have arms, but the head on them is like this specially designed suction mechanism that allows it to grip things on that one surface, so it doesn't have to have like a hold on the whole thing. Yeah. So like the head of the arm can pick up a box without having to touch it on multiple faces. Whereas this Tesla bot is having arms and hands like a regular human, and it's like 5'6" or some shit. So its capacity to carry things is only like 40 pounds. Whereas like the Amazon robots can lift probably hundreds of pounds because of the way they're designed not to be like humans. So the whole thing is poorly conceived. And it's not going to work.
Why would a robot... I mean, a robot designed as a human means that it's designed to perform human tasks and use human tools, which essentially just is a functioning slave. It's not like a specialized robot, like a construction robot that's only there to lift heavy objects or only there to like cut things or move things or to install something, you know. I think the reason that the Amazon robots are so spectacular is because they're highly specialized. I don't think that we can have a jack of all trades, do it all robot.
Yeah, and the whole reason humans have tools is because our body is poorly designed to do most things. But the only thing that we even remotely do well is run long distances. That's about it. Like we don't see well, we don't hear well, we don't really smell well, we don't taste well, we don't move well.
There's some humans that are good at running their mouths.
Yeah, right. But you know, most of our lives are facilitated by tools because of the poor body design. Like we can't fly without a plane. Whereas birds can just do that shit. That's fucked up. That's fucked up. Bird can just be like, oh, I'm fucking off to Florida.
Later. Suckers.
Yeah. Imagine if you tried to fuck off to Florida. How much technology is involved in that? Like, you can't even just drive straight there. You got to stop at a fucking gas station that has to use a pump to overcome gravity to get that fucking gasoline into your vehicle and then make sure it doesn't overflow so you don't have fucking gasoline just running all out your car. Like, that is a fucking marvel on its own. A gas pump?
Yeah, a mechanical pump that moves a fluid that could easily combust without combusting it.
Yep.
Fuel pumps are great.
Yep. And knowing that the shit can combust with just the slightest spark or some sort of
Static.
static electricity, that those things
Ambient energy.
don't explode more often is a fucking feat of engineering. But we just take that shit for granted, where I'm like, again, it's because we are so surrounded by that type of thing that we take it for granted. But the whole reason it's there is because our body's poorly designed. So why would you fucking design a machine after this poorly designed body? It's DOA.
Man,
The idea was just so poorly conceived.
it's they're baking in designed obsolescence.
Yep.
It's if they design it to fail at a certain point, it can be predictable, but that only assumes that they can mass produce these things and that they're affordable. If they're not affordable, then they're no good. I think that's the real reason that we're being screwed with the current batch of electric cars, is because the idea was sold on luxury and not on utility and accessibility.
Yeah, and I think that nails upon it, where you have these Teslas that have all this shit on the interior that make it seem like you're in a spaceship, but then you try to drive it over like a pothole that's too deep and your car might catch on fire. And it's like, I wish I was exaggerating.
What good is technology if nobody can afford it or if it's inaccessible? It's not.
There's no way any of those Cybertrucks are going to be off-road.
The people took their Model X's off road and they would scrape a rock and then they would catch on fire.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, from what I understand, not everyone who bought the X paid extra for the skid plate body armor package, and then still decided to take it off road. Like, I'm surprised more people with electric vehicles haven't had like issues with rain. Just driving through on a wet road, even. I'm actually fairly impressed that there haven't been issues with rain. Or maybe I'm just mistaken and those vehicles aren't being operated in wet conditions. Which is bullshit, because that's when you need a vehicle the most.
I would assume that they would have to like seal it enough so that none of the parts that are exposed to water would be at risk of like distributing a charge. But hey, what do I know? Maybe they don't, like, what agency is testing that? Because then I'm sure that agency can be tricked, and I don't trust that agency by proxy, the fact that they work for the American government.
I mean,
none of that shit.
Obviously, they can make spaceships, so we should trust them.
Challenger has entered the chat.
Well, my understanding is they were kind of intelligent about it. They had 80 attempted flights before they ever considered putting a person in one of those pods. So I guess that's being cautious. But they also came into a system when they had like 100 plus STS launches just for space shuttles. So
Still, I mean, this makes me think of Capricorn 1, where the U.S. government skimps on the materials for the rocket, so then they fake the launch, and then the astronauts participate in the fake launch and have moral dilemma, and then the government decides to murder them. And that's like, that sums up America, which is why I think a lot of people believe in moon conspiracy, because shit like Capricorn 1 is fairly believable. It's like, truth is stranger than fiction, man.
God, the scale of that kind of conspiracy, though.
Oh, yeah, that'd be way too big for these people to pull off, which is full circle. They wouldn't actually be able to pull it off. It's like more believable that they actually made it than pulled off some massive conspiracy. Ironically. They're just not that good.
Oh, that's funny.